Okay, I think we are ready to get started.
All right, I am going to call this meeting to order, and I am first going to do a roll call. Deborah Sims,
I'm here.
Sue J. Hernandez, Nicholas Hvac, Stephanie Rose, Peter Bauer,
Here.
Kate Grandusky,
Here.
Narce Rodriguez, Mark Everett,
Here.
Brad Bafaro,
He's here.
okay. And Valerie Ingram.
Here.
Great.
And Stephanie also just logged in.
Who?
Stephanie Rose.
Stephanie. Okay, great.
I'm here. Thank you.
And this is Nicholas. Hi, good evening.
Hi. All
Great.
right, so we have Nicholas and Stephanie that have joined us as well. All right, it is time for the flag salute. If you'll join me, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Next on the agenda, we have introductions, and I will go first. I'm Melinda Fisher. I'm a parent in the district. All my kids have graduated now, but I often host exchange students, so I'm still active in the school district. Next person to introduce, how about Deborah?
I'm Deborah Sims, and I am also a parent in the school district. My daughter is a senior this year.
Great. And Sue J, have you joined us yet? Okay, then let's go to Nicholas.
Hi, good evening. I'm Nicholas Hvac. I'm right here from Forest Grove. Today I'm from Walla Walla. I'm visiting here for a week. So I'm going to cut off about 6:15. I'll be with you till 6:15. Thank you for having me tonight.
Thank you. All right, Stephanie.
I'm Stephanie Rose, and I have a third grader at Joseph Gale and a sixth grader at Tom McCall, doing online school right now.
And Peter.
Hello, I'm Pete Bauer, a longtime member of the area. My wife is actually a school teacher with the district. I worked at the district for a little bit time ago. All my kids actually go to Visitation Catholic school at the moment, but they will all be going to Forest Grove starting in the next couple of years. So.
And Kate.
I'm Kate Grandusky, and I'm on the school board. And my kids graduated from Forest Grove School District, and I also taught in Forest Grove.
Narce.
Narce is absent tonight. She had a thing come up.
Okay, Mark.
Yeah, I'm Mark Everett. I'm on the school board. Like Kate, I had two of our kids who attended and graduated from Forest Grove, and I also taught in the district many years ago. So, yeah.
All right, Brad.
Brad Bafaro, second term on the school board, taught in the district, was an administrator in the school district for 36 years, I think. So, yeah.
All right, Valerie.
Hi there, Valerie Ingram, school board member, parent of two daughters that attend Forest Grove High School, and I'm also a Forest Grove High School graduate.
Great. All right, next on the agenda is the approval of the March 28th, 2020 agenda. Would someone like to?
It's the approval of tonight's agenda.
I'll make a motion, Melinda, to approve tonight's agenda.
And I'll second it.
All right. I'm going to go through a roll call vote. Deborah Sims,
Yes, I agree.
Sujay Hernandez is absent. And Nicholas,
Yes, good.
Stephanie,
Yes.
Pete,
Yes.
Kate,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Brad,
Yes.
Valerie.
Yes.
Great. And I am also a yes. All right. Next is the approval of the March 28th, 2020 meeting minutes.
I'll
All
move
right.
that we approve those.
Okay.
Second, Hafez.
Okay. Great. All right. I'm going to do a roll call vote. Myself, yes. Deborah,
Yes,
Nicholas,
Yes,
Stephanie,
Yes.
Pete,
Yes.
Kate,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Brad,
Yes.
Valerie.
Yes.
Great. Awesome. Okay. Next on our agenda is our budget update with Eileen Clute.
I thank you all for coming to tonight's budget meeting. It is the second kind of preliminary budget meeting right before our next meeting that we will have will be the first official budget committee meeting that I guess I need to share my screen. All right. All right. Can you see the presentation?
Yep.
All right. So tonight is the second meeting of the preliminary budget meetings. We're going to go over just a quick update on where we are today, give a few updates on kind of what we're looking at for next year on major assumptions. And then we'll talk about some enrollment information and projections. And finally, we'll end with kind of what our priorities are going to be going into this budget and have an open budget conversation with you guys about where you think our priorities should be for this budget that we'll be proposing to you at the May 12th meeting. Once Superintendent Parker delivers the budget message on May 12th, we will have 2 additional budget meetings that are already scheduled that you as a budget committee can ask for more information, review everything that you see, have discussion, listen to community, and then ultimately recommend a budget to the board where they'll have a board hearing and adopt the budget. So that's just kind of where we are in the process tonight. Quick update on financial update on where we are. I don't have a full cash flow for you tonight, but in looking at where we are today and where I'm anticipating us to end the year, no significant changes from what I presented last month. We are looking at ending with about a 20% ending fund balance. It's larger than what we would normally end with. Typically, we would end around 14%. With COVID and the closures, and I talked a lot about this last time, just the shortages in employment right now, or employees, and being able to hire people and subs. There's just a lot of things that we haven't been able to do this year that hopefully we'll be able to do and get ramped up next year for. So that's what's contributing to the fund balance and one of the driving factors of that. The things that we have left this year that are still kind of up in the air is we do have 3 months left. We're 3/4 of the way through the year. So we have 3 months worth of expenditures and revenue to come in between now and the time we close. Included in that is the biggest thing we have is our state school fund. So ODE is currently reconciling 3 years worth of state school fund estimates, and those are all going to impact either this year's cash flow and ending fund balance or next year's budget. The way ODE, like this year we get funded on estimates, and then next year ODE will take the actuals and reconcile, and then we'll get an adjustment. So that's what they're doing right now for last year. So last year's reconciliation, we should be getting estimates in the upcoming weeks. They'll update this current year's final estimate, and then we'll see any changes to next year's proposal or estimates for next year's budget. So we're working in 3 fiscal years, and all 3 years will impact next year's budget. Hopefully we'll get a couple of these before we finalize the budget for you. Sometimes we don't get those in time, and so we just put in estimates and projections, but that is one of the largest variables that we have outstanding between now and when the budget will be proposed for you. So that's kind of where we are this year. Any questions on an update on the cash flow before I move on to next year's budget? Okay.
I do have a question, Eileen.
Yes.
At what point do, I mean, this is just a kind of a interest question. At what point does the district stop allowing purchases for this fiscal year? You know what I mean? If out of department budgets or building budgets or things like that.
We do close POs for buildings and departments this time. I think it happened later last week when we closed POs for everybody. Okay. There still is always stragglers that come in or things that people forget that they didn't have a PO entered in. But for the most part, we close the POs, and then at the end of April, we'll do a new cash flow that'll include all of those projections and estimates for what departments and buildings are anticipating for the year. And that'll be included in the cash flow that I do next week. And that'll be the baseline we use for our beginning fund balance for next year's budget.
Okay.
But we do close them. We're not like, we try to be firm with it, but there's always things that come up. You know, if people didn't get a blanket PO in, or something came up that wasn't anticipated, there's always those flexibilities too. So it's not a hard drop, but it is something that gives us an estimate and guideline for, or guidance into what the ending fund balance is going to be for the year.
Okay, thanks.
That help?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So for the building blocks of the 22-23 budget, we are to give you kind of a preliminary insight on revenue assumptions going into next year's budget. We are at the second year of the biennium. So this year's state school fund was a $9.3 billion state school fund, giving 2022-23 about $4.7 billion for schools. And in that budget, what we're looking at doing for next year is maintaining our current enrollment for our revenue and budgeting on floor funding. And floor funding is a component of the state school fund formula where you get funded at the greater of the current year or the prior year, whichever one is higher. So in declining enrollment, you get funded at the prior year. And I'll go over some enrollment information here in a couple of slides, but just because of the unknown, and this year we budgeted assuming we would get some COVID enrollment returning to the district, and we actually lost more enrollment than what we had the prior year. And we have an exiting senior class that's higher than our incoming kinders. Between those two, we're wanting to budget our revenue at the floor funding. And that's that will help the district in just making sure that we're not going to have any negative adjustments next year once enrollment hits. We are, as far as other revenue sources, I have in here our indirect rates with all of the Esser COVID relief grants and reallocations. We have more funding coming in, grant funding coming in next year. And so we'll increase our indirect rate as compared to what was budgeted for this year. This is a one-time increase. So the following 2 budgets, you'll start to see a decline in this. But just know we are going to collect revenue in our general fund from those grants through indirect rate. We're looking at budgeting our local property taxes at the average of the last 3 years. So it's about a 3.7% increase. And then all of our other general fund resources, we're really looking at just trying to normalize the revenue. So that we're not going to include any major changes in those items. So those are the big revenue changes going into next year. And then as far as expenditures, we're looking at just making sure that we're budgeting in all of our labor costs, cost of living, step column movements, union negotiated amounts, union amounts that we know about. We are in full negotiations with both of our bargaining groups. So what is in this budget is assumptions and estimates. It's not going to be what's actual, because we most likely will not finalize those negotiations until well after the budget is adopted. So just know that there's estimates built in as placeholders for that. Looking at maintaining our target class size averages, maintaining all of our current programs, and then ensuring that we're accounting for all of our contracts, like our transportation, facilities, custodial, utilities, our community school payments, and any other negotiated contractual rates that we have coming up into next year. And then the other part of expenditures, the one that we're talking a lot about, is our ending fund balance for this year becomes resources and revenue for next year. And savings in your fund balance is one-time funds. It's not ongoing resources. So really looking at trying to look at what that fund balance is and how much it is going into next year, and how can we impact students and provide student needs and student supports without doing a long-term commitment. So really looking at what are those one-time things that we can help support the immediate need, but without committing us to future costs. So that's one of the conversations we're really trying to look at. How can we balance any adds or changes to the budget where we're not going to cause an issue later on long-term. Enrollment. This is kind of an ugly graph, but you can kind of see this graph we use to look at and track trends of enrollment and grade bands as students go through the schools. And so you can see like kinder is moving from kinder to first to second to third, and we can see how those progression happens over time. We do this in much more detail by building by grade level, by class averages. This is just the district-wide summary. You can see when COVID hit, we lost 332 students. And then the following year, this current year, we lost another 121 students. This combined by our exiting senior class versus our incoming kinder class being 72 students less, we're looking at this is the reason why we're going to budget based on the floor funding. So we're not going to budget based on enrollment growth for revenue. However, because of the fund balance and the place that we're at, we're able to this year budget enrollment differently. So normally we would try to budget our revenue and our staffing on the same enrollment projections. But this year, with just where we're at and the ability with our fund balance, we are looking at budgeting with about 167 students more for our staffing. So we're going to budget staffing based on increased enrollment and revenue based on floor. That makes sense?
Eileen,
Yep.
why don't you explain why we would do that?
Because if right now, if we were to budget based on floor for our staffing, we would be doing a lot more reductions. And so we're increasing our enrollment for our staffing budget in pockets in areas where students may return, and then staffing to start the year that way. One, it allows us more flexibility as we start the year, and we're not doing as much adjustments right now. We
So
have
we're-
fun.
So we're anticipating kids coming back in the upcoming year. And so we're going to have enough staff for those anticipated numbers for next year.
Correct.
Okay.
The other thing we're doing is in our, and you'll hear later on the SI and Esser updates at the regular board meeting, we have carryover in those funds where we have, I guess what you call pocket FTE. So we're setting aside dollars to go into next year to, if we don't get students back, it will reduce class size. And if we do get students back, it will help account for those bubbles as the students return and where the students return. Because we don't know if it's gonna, if, you know, we're gonna get a pocket of students returning in Echo Shaw first grade or Harvey Clark fourth grade or Tom McCall fifth grade. So where exactly the students come back, that'll allow us the flexibility to push in FTE at the start of the school year with those ESSER funds and SIA funds.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Hey, Eileen, I have a quick question.
Mhm.
I mean, basically looking at the last 2 years, that's like a 400, student plus reduction. Does anybody know like what happened to these kids? Are they just all doing homeschool or what's the conventional thought on where these kids are? Do they all move out of state? I mean, I kind of doubt it, but.
No, I think it's a combination from a lot of things. Online schools, charter schools or private schools, those have seen a lot of increase in their enrollment, homeschooling. So it really depends on the family. There's several different places that students have gone in addition to, there are a few moving out of state, but primarily homeschools and private schools and online.
All right. Just curious if, if anybody has any kind of crystal ball as to, how many might be coming back or, has there been interest expressed, going along that, we're sitting out this year, but probably next year we'll be back.
So I think we're seeing currently, we started the year with 260 students in online, and we're looking at those numbers dropping, but it's still a big, there's a lot of variable here that we don't know. The other one is many of some of these students that have left went to the online charters, but they're not there anymore. And so we're still trying to figure out exactly, not all the numbers are adding up. So we're still not quite sure where some of those students are. And so that's why, again, the variability of what may happen in the fall is pretty, as Eileen mentioned, is very large.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, thanks.
The other thing in this loss to remember though is our exiting senior classes. So like this one was 466, whereas our incoming kinders was only 369. So that's 100 of these students was just that progression of a large exiting class. So not all of this is directly due to COVID. Yeah.
And Eileen, the difference in the numbers, the budget, budget on the floor and staffing based on some returns. So it's correct that because of the larger ending fund balance, it allows us to do that, right?
Right.
That's okay. Yeah. I mean, if we had a lower ending fund balance, I think you said it, we'd have to make decisions. Then.
Right. We would be making a lot more decisions than what we are.
Got it.
Yeah. And we did the same thing this year. In 21-22, we estimated we would receive more students back, and then we ended up not getting as many students back or losing students. And so we staffed higher because we had that fund balance, and we didn't make any adjustments once the year started and we didn't see the enrollment loss, or, we seen the enrollment loss, but we didn't have to make those adjustments. So we're actually seeing much lower class sizes and being able to maintain those this year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do we have any idea what the incoming kinder class is going to look like number wise yet, Eileen?
No, I think they did kinder roundup, but we typically don't get, it gives us a idea, but not everybody enrolls. So I don't have a good idea of the kinder numbers for next year, other than looking at our birth rates and our PSU projections.
Thanks.
Okay. Another thing I wanted to highlight for you tonight is the board's commitment over the last several years on reducing class size. This is the budgeted class size projections. It's not the actual class size projections once students are in place, but it's what we budget year over year. And looking back at 2016-17, it was one of our high points as a district. Our K4s were at 30-1. Our 5-6 was at 32-1. Our 7-8 was at 33-1. And our 9-12 was at about 38-1 on average, district-wide. And then over time, we've made a lot of progress towards class size. And now we're budgeting at 23.5-1 for K4s, 28-1 for 5-6, 30-1 for 7-8, and 31-1 for 9-12. So there's been a lot of progress made on our average class sizes and prioritizing that district-wide. Another question that comes up quite frequently actually is, well, way back before 2010, before we made cuts, we had X. And I really like this. It kind of shows, it's our grades K4 in blue and then 5-6 in red. It shows like the progression over time of how funding and reductions have impacted our class size. So we were back at 25-1 budgeting on average for our K4s and about 28-1 on our 5-6s. And then you can see we had to make some reductions and adjustments after 2010. And then again in 2016-17, additional reductions were made. But over time, you can see right now we are actually budgeting lower class size averages today than pre-2010, the reductions back here. So we've made a lot of progress and we are actually in a better place on our K4s, and we are in the same place, so at 28-1 for our grades 5-6. So there's a lot of, it just kind of shows how that progression happens when our funding is impacted. And then this kind of hits the point what I was just talking about, budget to actual. So this current fiscal year, we budgeted at our target for class size, so the 23.5-1. And when enrollment didn't come in, we did not make adjustments. We did not have to make adjustments to class sizes because of the enrollment loss and our fund balance. And so we were able to maintain on average this year around a 21-1 on our average class sizes. We're going to budget next year, assuming some enrollment comes back for staffing, and that 23-1, 23.5-1 on class sizes again going into next year. And then the thing that we have in addition to this is we're budgeting conservatively. We're budgeting enrollment increase, plus we have so-called pocket FTE going into next year with our SIA and Esser funds to help support bringing class sizes down or to support anywhere that class size bubbles happen with the return of students. And then the same with 5-6, 7-8, and 9-12. You can kind of see that drop in average class sizes and maintaining actual class sizes lower than what we had actually budgeted for this current year. Okay. Next, I'm going to talk a little bit, I'm going to go over the strategic plan, our school improvement plan, and community engagement. And in developing the budget and trying to balance the budget and looking at our priorities, ensuring that our budget is supporting those priorities, these are the different things that we look at. Our strategic plan, school improvement plan, and then any community engagement. And then that's what helps us in balancing the budget and having our budget conversations. When I'm done going through those, I'll have an opportunity for you as our budget committee members to provide feedback and information to us to help guide us in making those final decisions on balancing the budget on where you believe the priorities should be for our district. The strategic plan for our district got 4 components. It is constructing a world-class behavioral and mental health model, building safe and welcoming school environments that address our student and family needs, producing well-rounded lifelong learners by building academically rigorous learning environments focused on the future, developing communities that value cultural proficiency, identity, safety, bilingualism, and inclusion. And then our school improvement plan has 5 goals, and those are focused around ensuring students graduate from high school, ready for college, career, and civic life. Our underserved student EL populations will achieve higher growth outcomes. All students will have access to enhanced social emotional systems of support, to promote early learning preschools at 2 most impacted schools. And then the 5th one is to underserved student populations will achieve higher outcomes. So all underserved populations. And then lastly, we have our community engagement priorities. This is all from the district visioning and SSA engagement that we did right before COVID. And the top priorities that came out of that community engagement process were pretty consistent between the parent and community priorities versus the student priorities. Meeting students' mental health and behavioral needs, class size, having specialists to access additional opportunities for students, providing structure to ensure students are at grade level, and then a well-rounded education were the parent and community priorities. And then the student priorities were around well-rounded education, removing barriers for students, meeting the students' mental and behavioral health needs, hiring specialists, and then providing professional development for our teachers. Based on those, we started looking at our budget guiding principles and really wanting to ensure we're budgeting systems that are targeted towards meeting both of those plans, the school improvement plan and the strategic plan, with a focus on maintaining lower class sizes, ensuring all students graduate, providing supports to underserved populations, mental and behavioral health. And then we did add for this year the accelerate student learning to offset the COVID-19 learning loss. And then the financial stability, just making sure we're looking at a long-term picture and not just a single year. So based on what you've heard for our priorities, a lot of those are pretty consistent messaging and consistent on what we're hearing. But as a budget committee member, what are we missing? What things do we need to consider or highlight or emphasize more during this budget process, specifically in the year that we're in? And then are there any changes to what those priorities should be? This is an opportunity for you as a budget committee member to provide us feedback before the budget is proposed.
Right now?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I got something real quick. So just from different perspective, the way I look at it when I'm reading this and seeing it and knowing, so I'm pretty involved within the community here. And so I'm not on a lot of different levels. I see the different issues and problems on a very wide scope. Okay. The goals are right. Everything looks right. It's the order that I don't agree with, just because the graduation is always in the top, number 1, number 2. Obviously that's the main goal, we know that, the end goal. However, to me, number one is impossible to do without putting number two first in the goals. If we don't bring up everybody to the same level, your graduation, like, that's never going to catch up to where we need it to be. See, that one's always going to be behind. So my opinion is we need to move that around. And this, like the behavior health, this stuff's really important too. Like in that last section, I can't remember which one it was. One of the last two slides mentioned maybe the student priorities or their communications with the parents. You know, there's a lot of mental health stuff and behavioral health that needs to go in those conversations too. There's a lot of kids even talking about that. You know, almost every kid I speak with or a parent of who has a kid, especially in high school, will talk about this, and in junior high. You know, I mean, they're pretty open for options. I think they need to be more in the conversation. Yeah, that's what I got. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephanie. What one did you say? I missed it. Which one did you say should be first and then mental health?
Okay, so in the goals, I think, I mean, can you put that slide back, do you think, real quick?
There you go. Yeah.
Thank you.
Can you split the screen, Eileen?
Let's see if we could do that.
Sorry, just a thought.
No, that's a good idea. If not, it's okay.
Now everybody's watching.
While she's doing that, Stephanie, I think you were talking about the school improvement plan where goal 1 was all students graduate, and then goal 2 is our underserved population. Is that right?
I don't think so. Maybe. I don't think it was that one, actually.
Okay.
But I mean, I see that priority is often number one in everything I see, right? Whether it's a strat plan, whether it's a goal, whether it's a student improvement, whatever, it's always up at the top priority. Again, it makes sense, but I think that's the ultimate goal. I don't think that that's the number one main focus, because we can't get there without helping all this other troubles we got.
Yeah, I appreciate you bringing this up. I will tell you that on the school improvement plan, there isn't a priority there. Goal 1, goal 2, like
Okay.
one's not achieved, because you're absolutely, what you pointed out is very appropriate. We're actually trying to do all of those things at once, at least in my own mind. But I appreciate your feedback, because we'll think about that.
Thank you.
That was a good start.
I mean, I can go for days if you want. No, just joking. No, I'm just joking. I think it's all kind of that same thing for me, what I see a lot. And then I consider the issues that I hear and I'm seeing, and it's all this stuff. I mean, sheesh, I think my daughter, for example, okay, like I'm really considering on getting her into Gaston School District next year, but listen, hear me out. She's the kindest, sweetest. She's not like me, okay, guys. She's opposite. She's got the love for people and she's got everything about that, but she's a sweet, kind-hearted little gal that just wants to do her best and try. And this is the first year that she didn't want to go to school, and that's a problem. And she loves her teachers. All her teachers always love her. She's a straight A student, right? She's an athlete. She's a helper. But putting her to NAM scares me a little bit. Just because if this intimidated her, I don't know what she's going to think about that. And I know there's a lot of issues in terms of this behavior, mental health stuff, not enough support and help because of budget or staffing, right? Shortage. We know what's going on. So how do we fix these problems? And I know there's talks going on about that right now. So I think, I don't know. I hate the thought of taking her out, but it just scares me and I don't see a solution for it. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. And this stuff right here, the priorities to me aren't going to solve the problem. It's going to say, okay, yeah, we definitely can stick with Forest Grove and be okay. You know what I mean? From my perspective. Thanks, Dave.
So I would say, yeah, Stephanie, let's talk. But your remark there that NAMS is understaffed, I would disagree with. Because actually we've got quite a bit of staffing there. But I'm happy to sit down and talk with you some more about that.
Yeah, no. Don't get me wrong though. Maybe I misworded that. Okay, I don't want to misword here. It's not even that. I think the situation is just so extreme right now, right? And there's a lot on top of COVID. There's a lot of double duty still. I mean, there's still a lot of stuff going on that's not what it should be. Normal, right? and the problems are amplified now, right? So I guess how do we balance that out? And I don't know the solution to that. And that's what I guess I'm trying to say. Like I know the problem. Okay.
Yeah, and we've got some good things going on there. I know Juliana is meeting with parents, and again, I'm happy to sit down and talk with you more about what we're doing.
Thanks, Dave.
Yeah. Other questions? I mean, this is a good time. There was a lot that we presented on enrollments, budgets, and
I'm curious about the accelerated learning to help students catch up from COVID. What does that involve?
Right now, K through 6, what it means is that every 6 weeks, the schools are sitting down and meeting. They do what's called 100% and 20% meetings where they sit down and talk about how kids are growing. And then they start to move in interventions for kids who are not growing or not growing at the rate that they want. And to be honest, they're also putting in enhancements. So kids who are growing faster, we want to make sure that we keep good materials out in front of them. The schools have also, we've invested about $1 million in extra interventions, and different schools are tackling this a little bit differently, but there's a lot of work being done. The kids are growing. They're just not, again, after a year and a half in the pandemic, they're not where we want them to be. And it's going to be several years of intervening like this that's going to help us get folks back to where they're at. We're seeing this across Washington County is what I know. I talked with the other superintendents, but all of the school districts it's going to be a long haul here to kind of get back. I think we should bring that up too, which is the Esser budget and the SI budget, which we're going to talk about in the board meeting proper. That's, again, those were specifically set out to address at-risk behavior, mental health behavior, ELL, and our kind of underserved populations. And so there's another, along with our general fund, there's another investment plan that's out there kind of that surrounds these elements. Other questions?
Hey, it's Pete. I actually have a couple of questions. So I'm curious about facilities and maybe some of the improvements coming down the road. And I don't know that, is the budget sort of really just strictly around operations, and there's sort of like a separate sort of function that works on facilities improvements. That's probably just because I'm new. But yeah, I didn't see that mentioned, and I'm just curious about that.
That's a great question, Peter. We have, right now we're working through the bond development committee, and a lot of like our long-term deferred maintenance or major projects typically go through some sort of bond process or are incorporated in a bond. So we do have our bond committee working right now to try to narrow down a particular bond package, if any. And so that would meet a lot of our deferred maintenance or our larger projects. As far as the Esser, we are utilizing, and you'll see it if you hang out a little bit longer for the regular board meeting, we'll have an update on Esser, and we are utilizing quite a bit of Esser funds on improving our air quality and our HVAC and different components on trying to be able to get better filtration in our schools. So we're trying to solve some of those needs that we might not necessarily be able to do with our regular general fund operating budget through those two avenues right now.
Okay, cool. Because one thing I've been thinking about sort of over the course of the pandemic, and I'm sort of able to have a job that allows me to work remotely, and sort of the backbone infrastructure of the IT world, has just been so critical, to allow really a lot of work to get done over the pandemic. The same with schools. I'm just thinking about some of those facilities that, maybe need to be upgraded. And, I took a lot of geology classes in college, so I tend to think about earthquake preparedness. And so, I know some of the buildings are probably not up to snuff still, because it takes a long time to get to that point. And just thinking about how critical, all that IT infrastructure was to sort of keep everything running. In the case, God forbid we should have another pandemic in the next, year or two, we could run into the same issue, with some other sort of disaster, and just being able to rely on some of those systems, to keep school going, when we're not able to be together in a building. So,
Yeah.
I could take that one a little bit. I think we feel pretty good where we're at technology-wise. The district's made a long-term commitment, devices and the rest. So in the pandemic, we did utilize some Esser monies for hotspots and some other things, but by and large, we did pretty well with this. I think moving forward, we would look at a bond to kind of make some investments in some technology. But I feel pretty good about where we sit right now to be able to manage these. It's, again, the work that technology, our department has done to manage this pandemic has been awesome. So while there's still some good investments for us to make, I feel pretty good about where we're at.
okay, cool.
And Peter, if you want to be on a facilities committee or a future bond planning committee, I will definitely write your name down.
Okay. Well, I come from the world of large construction projects, so I find that interesting.
Perfect. Anybody else have any priorities or things that we need to consider making sure is highlighted or emphasized in this budget?
I would ask this question, which is, we continue to kind of prioritize and work on class sizes. Is that still a priority for folks?
I think it's great. Seeing those numbers go down, I think is critical. I think we all remember, sort of going to college or going to high school and seeing that drastic jump in class sizes, and just sort of getting a running start with a smaller class size in elementary school is critical to be able to make that jump to, sort of being a smaller, a person in a bigger world, as it were. I think the more we can, sort of keep those class sizes small and get kids engaged and, excited about learning, the more success we'll have down the road.
Yeah, I would agree with Peter that that's a priority, especially with the pandemic for the last 2 years, that at the elementary level, we really need to keep those kids in smaller classrooms, because we're not only dealing with academics, but we're also dealing with mental health issues. So I would say that that's a number one priority.
I think Stephanie has her hand up.
I think it almost, in a sense, could also maybe be looked at by year, by grade, or by age as well. Because if you look at that one chart back that showed how where they were back then, it was probably 31 to 33 in high school, and then K through whatever was, I believe 23, around that range, which is great. Don't get me wrong, really good for those grades too. But does that make it, is that harder for high school? And that's hard. That's a lot of work for teachers after work. That's 30 kids you got to do grading for, and you know how that goes. I just didn't know if that, are the numbers where they should be according to the grade level? You know what I mean? Is that normal? Or does it make a difference? Or I was just wondering.
So when you're looking at secondary schools, one of the things that we have to talk about is average class size and the fact that secondary teachers have a prep period. So, and I'll try to explain this is because it makes a big difference, because what it is that in a secondary school, you don't have access to all your teachers at any one time. At any one period during the day, a sixth of your teachers or a quarter are on prep. And so what it means is if I have 1,000 students, I can only spread them amongst 75% of my teachers at the high school. That means a quarter are off on a prep. And what that does is it means you actually have to fund, we're actually funding the high school for hiring the number of teachers at 23, I think it's 23.25 if I did my math right. So you're actually paying 23.25, which is basically below what you're funding that elementary school at in just numbers of teachers and the cost. And so then we kind of calculate the average class size, which is what Eileen put out there, is kind of what you would actually expect to see. So we play this game between at what point are we funding the high school, because of, again, you got to fund it pretty low to even get the class sizes, the actual class sizes out there at 30. So it becomes kind of a challenge. I'll also tell you that in the high school, they have classes of 70, 40 to 70 PE teachers in a PE class, and then you might have bands that are larger, and then you might have some ELL classes that are smaller. So what you actually see out there can be quite a bit different. But I think you're right. I mean, the question is still a good one around, are we staffing the high school at the right level? Are we staffing the middle school at the right level? So we would hear, I mean, we're open to those conversations.
And I would say, Dave, I would just add that at the middle school and the high school levels, you're right about, I mean, you might have AP classes that have, 20 kids in them. And some elective classes that have 30 or 35 kids in them. But I think when, at least when I always looked at it, I was trying to look at the core classes that kids have to take and what's the size of those classes. So language arts is a really good one. Everybody has to, at least at the high school and middle school, high school, all the way up, has to take language arts classes. So I think if you look at some of those core classes that are required, and you look at the class size, the average class size in those classes, that's sometimes can be a little bit telling. I have no idea where we're at on those numbers, but as a principal, I always looked at those, to see where you're at for those core classes.
Yeah. And I can pull those numbers. The problem is this year they're going to be low. Just because we didn't readjust after we didn't have as many kids.
Right.
I will say that the high school of all of our schools held, and this is true across Washington County, the high schools held their enrollment more than elementary schools and secondary or middle schools.
Fred?
I think one area in terms of priorities that I would just bring up based on the last 20 years is just improving instruction. It's mentioned in a couple different areas about well-rounded education, and we have targeted groups that we're really working toward in our goals, ELL, special ed. But I think generally speaking, if we set a goal to improve our instruction, I think we'll be better off as a school district if we continue to work on that and improve what we're doing. No matter how we quantify it, I think it should be a high priority in terms of moving forward.
I agree.
And okay. Instruction, absolutely. And again, to me, this is the kind of thing where it's always going to be a top priority. Like that's like, just like graduation, right? That's always going to be, you have to keep continuing, changing and keeping up. But, so where we're at right now in time is so hard for me to make that a high priority when that means more education, more professional development, more learning for these teachers on top of everything else they're already having to do. They're behind on kids. We know how it is. And I just think things again need to be focused on these other issues. And maybe this, if there's only like a long-term budget, next year or so, whatever, but I don't know. I feel like right now, these next few years really need to focus and regroup and get these kids where they need to be. And instruction's great right now. Teachers are doing great. We got, they know what they're doing. They could do things that school couldn't teach them. They know each kid individually, no doubt about that. So I really think that we got to fix the current situations first and prioritize the kids first and where they get them where they need to be. Thank you, though.
Yeah, I don't think it's mutually exclusive, though. I think we have a K4, K6 literacy adoption. So we're going to have a lot of conversations about instruction. And we'll also be pinpointing that instruction for what student needs are. I think we can actually do both of those things. And we're going to have to, because with the new literacy adoption, everybody's going to be learning some new pieces. And this adoption will be more explicitly phonics based. So there's learning to do both in the I also agree that we have a set of kids who have needs, Stephanie, and we need to get focused on what they need. But we are going to be able to do both of those things. We're going to have to. Like I said, there's a new adoption coming. I really appreciate everybody's comments tonight. There was lots of good, interesting things for us to begin to sink our teeth into. So I appreciate your feedback.
I do. That is all we had tonight for the budget committee. I did want to remind everybody that if you have any questions or you want specific information or data for the budget proposal, to please let me know so I can pull it ahead of time, be able to give us as much conversation and information at the budget meeting as we can. The next one on May 14th, May 12th, is when you'll see the budget proposal, and then you guys will be able to look through it and take some time asking questions. So again, let me know if you have any questions beforehand. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. The last item we have tonight is I'm just asking if anybody has any questions, comments, or requests. All right. If that is it, I am going to adjourn the meeting, and we'll see you on the 12th.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay, board members, can you stay on for the board meeting now?
Okay, I gotta plug in my computer.
Should I start the board meeting? Or give people a few minutes?
I think you can go ahead and start.
I think we're ready.
Here, yeah.
Okay, good. All right, good evening. I'd like to call the school board meeting for April 25th, 2022 at 6:31. The roll call board present, Mark,
Present.
Brad,
I'm here.
Val,
Present.
Sonia,
Here.
and I'm here also. The school board will hear public comment for unscheduled public appearances received through the designated form on the district website. Patrons who wanted to comment live via Zoom should have already registered as a participant and completed the form to provide their information and indicated they were going to provide a live comment. If you are providing your comment live as a Zoom participant, please be sure your full name is displayed in your Zoom profile. You can change that by clicking on the participants button, hover over your ID, click the rename and type in the correct information and then select OK. Comments will be read by district staff or delivered live via Zoom at the appropriate time on the agenda and will be limited to 3 minutes. Please stand for the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, and with liberty and justice for all. We'll do introductions for the audience and staff. I'm Kate Grandusky, board chair.
John
Mark?
O'Neill, Assistant Superintendent.
Okay.
Eileen Clute, business.
Mark Hughes, your facility manager.
David Warner, Communications.
Enrique Pinion, Technology Department.
I think that's it.
Okay, all right, that sounds good. Approval of tonight's agenda. Do I have a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
So moved.
Second,
Second,
discussion? All right, I will do a roll call. Mark,
yes.
Brad,
Yes.
Val,
Yes.
Sonia,
Yes.
and I'm a yes also. Dave, correspondence, celebrations?
Nothing this week. I did get something in that I'll read the next time around. I need to do a little bit of work.
Okay. Student report, Sonia?
So last week, a bunch of things were going on. We had a spirit week for Earth Week. We also had our prom court rally, which was pretty cool. And then we had prom on Saturday. I had fun. I think a bunch of other people had fun. And it was pretty cool. Everyone dressed up really nicely. And yeah, I think it went well. And we also held our elections this week, and we voted on Thursday during advisory. And last year compared to this year we increased voting by 500 votes. So that's pretty cool. And the new ASB president for next year is Miley Vernon. And if you guys have been on the school board for from last year, she was actually giving student reports then also. So next year, instead of me here, sadly, it will be her though. So that's pretty cool. And then currently we are going to have a Renaissance rally on Thursday. And basically everyone in leadership classes are just preparing for the next year. And we also have a group in Renaissance. We're planting trees currently around the campus. So you should go check that out soon. I don't think they're fully finished planting, but sometime they will be. And then in terms of how people are feeling, I think people were definitely pretty excited for prom. And understandably now some people are kind of tired. But that's what I have.
Any questions for Sonia?
Yeah, where was prom at?
It was at the Left Bank Annex in Portland.
Okay.
Sonia, go ahead, Mark.
Oh, is that do you go up, is it like a rooftop thing, Sonia, or?
There's like a second floor and a first floor. So
Okay.
second floor, which was kind of like the entrance floor. There's 3 floors now thinking about it, but we had like the dance area, and then we had like a second floor for people to just sit down, and then in like the basement area we had like a bunch of games set up because it was kind of like casino themed.
Okay.
So for people who weren't super into dancing, they could go play some card games and stuff.
Okay. Okay. I think I may have been there for a prom at my other school, so I think I can remember that place.
Yeah, I have just a little more information. It seems like the right time for me to jump in there. It looks like this is coming out of the high school, and it was great to have a normal traditional junior senior prom. We had a great turnout of parents and students to help set up and kind of get it going. The attendance was 550 students attended this prom. It was at the Hvac Annex from 8 to 11 p.m. Students started lining up at 7:15, and then the line got so long that they started allowing the entry early because they wanted to kind of get them off of the street. The theme was dripping in luxury in Monte Carlo. And again, the photographs were taken by Gwen Hullinger, and then the FGHS culinary and Chef Leffler put together kind of the food and stuff. And I think it was just great. They had 24 staff members, chaperone, and Officer King, an off-duty Forest Grove police officer, was there to kind of manage that. So again, it was just great to get back to some normal. And I think the kids really enjoyed it and showed up in mass to kind of say, yay.
Well, thank you, Dave. Sonia, I was going to ask you, did I understand you correctly that 500 more kids voted this year for leadership?
Yes. Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
So last year, I think it was a lot harder for people to vote since we were online, but like about 300 people voted last year, but this year, almost 800 people voted.
Wow.
That's like kind of a big
increase.
Yeah, that's great. Do you have any understanding of why the increase?
Well, so I personally ran elections, I guess, but last year it was sort of just vote whenever for this amount of time, but this year we did it where we had an advisory, and then everyone in 9th, 10th, and 11th grade, they voted in their advisory while we had the prom court rally for the seniors. And so we also gave out stickers for everyone who voted. So maybe there was because there was an incentive, maybe people voted, I'm not sure.
Well, that's great. Maybe you should think of a career in the elections, in the National Election Office. We need someone. Well, thank you very much for your report. I appreciate it. Dave, you're up next with calendar notes, recognition.
So wanted to talk a little bit about COVID. We are watching a small increase. In our schools, it's very small, but in other parts of Washington County, they are beginning to see some increases in cases. In specific, this is now the BA2, the variant of Omicron that is this newest one. OHSU, I just saw it today for the first time. They have forecasted a small surge. It peaks around June 10th. And to be honest, it's about the same size as what we had May last year, if you can remember back to that little surge. So I don't think as an organization that there's any reason for us to change our current policies. As always, everyone is welcome to mask up. If things begin to take off, I don't think we need to change where we're at, but we'll keep an eye on it. For us, I will say here in Forest Grove, we have not yet really seen this. As of today, we were down to 1 staff member with COVID and about 11 students. That's pretty similar to where we've been over the last 2 weeks, 3 weeks. So And that was similar. I talked with Banks and with Gaston today. They both have kind of similar things going on. Like I said, I think in Beaverton and some of the larger districts, they are seeing a little bit more of a surge, but that's just kind of where we're at right now. Graduation, just wanted to remind everybody, graduation is set for June 4th at 10 a.m. It'll be one session. We're in person in our gym, back to kind of our normal setup. We will have overflow viewing spaces in a couple of different areas. And again, we would encourage folks to wear masks if whatever they feel most safe doing, but we will be moving forward with our graduation this year. And then plant sale is starting this week, April 29th, 28th, 29th, and 30th from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. And again on May 5th, 6th, and 7th from 10 a.m. to 5 p.m. The greenhouses are again full, and this is a major fundraiser for them to kind of run their programs. So we're excited about it. If you're looking for a Mother's Day present, that's a good place to go get it. And that's it for tonight for me.
Okay, thanks, Dave. Next up is unscheduled public appearances, and we did receive one email, but the name was not filled out completely. So the rules are that you have to submit your full name. So hopefully that person can resubmit with their full name, and we'd be happy to read it at the next board meeting. And because there's no other written or open Zoom that for unscheduled public appearances, I'm not going to read the text here. I'm going to move on to the consent agenda. The consent agenda is made up of routine, non-controversial items to be voted on under one motion. Are there any items within the consent items a board member or the superintendent wishes to discuss separately? Okay, I'm going to do a roll vote for consent. Mark?
Yes.
Brad?
Yes.
Val?
Yes.
And I'm a yes also. The next, a presentation of the school investment account. And that's Dave and Eileen.
Perfect. Eileen, do you want to share your screen? Perfect. So we wanted to start out tonight by kind of reviewing and going through where we've been and kind of where we're going with some of these pieces. So we're going to kind of we'll talk through the student investment account first, and then we'll talk through Esser. Next one. Bringing back, this was almost 3 years ago, I want to say, is where the student investment account, we started to really do some work around it. There's basically 4 areas that you could spend this money in: class size, well-rounded education, instructional time, and then health and safety. And this came straight from the law itself, is where these pieces came from. They had 2 outcomes for SIA. One was reducing academic disparities, gaps between outcomes for different student groups, and then meeting students' mental health and behavioral health needs. So again, these were the things that they wanted to see come out of those investments in the 4 areas on the last slide. And then we went out and we did a whole series of community meetings, both before SIA and then during SIA. And what we kind of came out was kind of these 4 strategic visions: construct a world-class behavioral health and behavioral and mental health model, produce well-rounded lifelong learners by building academically rigorous learning environments focused on the future, build safe and welcoming school environments that address student and family needs, and then develop communities that value cultural proficiency, identity, safety, bilingualism, and inclusion. And again, we're bringing these back because as we present this, we just want to remind everybody what were the ideas around both the goals of this and kind of the vision for what this money might bring us. For us, we kind of broke this down into English language development, behavioral health and wellness, instructional improvement, and then this class size, well-rounded education. And so our original investments in counselors in ELL teachers, we had some coaching that we built into this. We had some investments in music and PE for that well-rounded education, but these were the priorities that we originally identified, and you ended up voting and approving. So I'm bringing this back up because we're at this period of time where we're going to go back out and have a conversation with our community around a bunch of different programs, but specifically this program, the Student Investment Account. And in the fall of next year, I'm going to head out and do a series of community meetings around a bunch of different programs, but the Student Investment Account specifically. We're going to have to create kind of some the things that we went through, the vision, what are we doing with the money now? Are we going to continue doing what we've been doing with it? Do we want to make some changes? And then in the fall, I'll go out, do the community engagement. Next winter, we'll be creating the plan. And then next spring, we'll be bringing it back in front of the board for a new approval. We're going to create a 4-year plan that gets renewed every 2 years. And so that's kind of you're going to see moving forward from here on out is with this student investment account is we make a 4-year plan, and then 2 years into it, we come back, do some more engagement, we evolve the plan, and then we have the vote, we have the board vote on it. I wanted to bring this up because of, again, what we're doing right now is kind of finishing off the end of this and getting ready to kind of plan anew on the student investment accounts. And now Eileen's going to kind of take us through where we spent the money and where we're kind of spending the money.
Okay. So in the fall, I brought to kind of what our plan was for the budget, both for SIA and Esser. I wanted to just kind of give you an update of where we forecast our total spend to be for this year and what our initial budget plans are going into next year. So this year, you could see we are spending a significant portion of the SIA budget on counselors, instructional assistants. Then we have our supports, so mental health specialists, our literacy coach, math TOSA, NAMS intervention, our ELD coordinator, music and PE, community school gets a portion. We do have a little bit in class size, and then ELD. So it's kind of how we have spent the funds for SIA this year. We anticipate spending about $3.2 million total in SIA funds. This is the same information, it's just the dollars behind the graph before, but it also shows you where the FTE is. We hired 8 counselors, 12.16 FTE of instructional support time for instructional assistants, whether it's supervision or classroom support, 2 FTE in music and PE, ELD teachers, 3.2, and then we have our literacy coaches, NAMS intervention, that's direct classroom support. So it just kind of gives you a little bit more detail on how we are spending the funds. We did get a grant award of $4.6 million, and we'll have $1.3 million left for carryover going into next year. Looking at budgeting the carryover going into next year, we are setting aside $500,000 for classroom support. And so that is those bubbles I talked about in the budget committee meeting about being able to have funds set aside to be able to support where and when the students come back. And if they don't, then it'll directly impact class size. Calc building improvements. So over at Taylor Way, we're looking at improving both floors of Calc to be able to support more students and float better. This will be done over the summer. And then we have classified literacy adoption support, a 1.0 temporary 1-year literacy adoption support. And then the first quarter salaries from quarter one of next year will utilize up to $258,000 of that to finish off the grant. And that's pretty typical for grants. We typically have like a 15-month spending pattern on grants where we can spend them up through the first quarter. And so that's what we're going to utilize the rest of this to finish off this year's grant into next year.
Eileen, what's the classified literacy adoption support? What is that?
Yeah, I think Dave might be able to talk a little bit more about that one.
So what we're looking at is as we get into this adoption, they needed some help with folks, who could handle some of the paperwork and some of the things going on. That we talked about trying to hire, do they need another coach or do they need another this? And what they decided is they'd rather just take the coaches that they already have and keep them focused on coaching, but then bring in this one year piece. It looks like Elena's coming on too, so she may be able to help us with that. But the idea here was we didn't need a full licensed person to do the work that they're looking at doing. Elena, do you want to correct me?
I just signed on, so I don't know what I'm correcting.
Oh, that's funny. That's so funny. Your timing was great. What we were talking about was in the money rolling over, there's a classified literacy adoption support 1.0, and they were just looking for some of the things that person would be doing.
Yeah, supporting with, just-in-time support for the rollout implementation. So mostly meaning getting materials to teachers, overseeing the distribution of materials, what's missing, what needs to be ordered immediately if there aren't. We're learning from the pilot right now that we ordered based on what was in Synergy and what teachers said were numbers, but then kids kind of flux in and out. And so there's a whole host of needs that, along with the tech side, that's like a whole different issue with just-in-time support for teachers as they're rostering kids and trying to get kids access to the program. So that would that person would support all things implementation that first year to make sure that we have teachers ready to go.
Okay, thanks.
I have a question. Talking about the literacy adoption, how are we going to educate and support the aides who provide the literacy piece to small groups?
Well, so much of the PD that we will be offering certified will also be offered to classified. So the assumption is not just that teachers are getting it, but also that classified staff are getting it. When you say small groups, are you talking about intervention, Kate, or what are you referring to for small groups?
No, I'm not talking about interventions. I'm just talking about, oftentimes within the classroom, there are aides in there, supporting the kids within the classroom. And then there's the teachers, the aides do pull out kids for interventions with, special ed and that, but oftentimes the aides are not, they don't have the instruction or understanding of the new literacy adoptions. And so how are we going to help them have that support and understanding?
Yeah, we're going to have to find ways, just when we offer our ongoing PD for teachers, we're going to have to do it for classified as well. It might be a little bit tailored, more specific. Our coaches will also be able to do a lot of internal PD for classified that's a little bit more flexible based on their schedule. But yes, just like with any new curriculum, we're also going to have to do the same pieces for classified.
Thank you.
Perfect. I'm going to keep us moving here. Other questions about kind of the carryover?
Okay. All right, so to jump into SIA, but for next year's budget, it's a similar distribution. This graph just shows you the percentages of spend or proposed budget spend for SIA for next year. This is the same thing, just in more detail. And you can see at the end, these are the new things that would be added. Everything else above is consistent with how we're currently spending SIA. But next year, we're looking at adding the calc admin, a science and health TOSA, a mental health specialist for Neil Armstrong, some breakfast after the bell support, because that is now mandatory. And we've been supporting that with other grant funds that were a one-time this year fund. So we'll roll that into next year. And then some Spanish literacy support at Joseph Gale that they've been funding out of their building or other funds. So that is next year's proposed budget and the changes going into 22-23 for SIA.
Can you talk about the Science Health TOSA?
Yeah, absolutely. What we're recommending, Mark, is that when Brenda came in and talked about her ability to coach math, what she talked about is she spread so thin trying to cover science, math, garden projects that she's not able to do the work. In our district, K through 6, we don't really have a focus on science. And what we're trying to do here is just get, originally they kind of presented to me an idea of doing a math science coach. And I said, well, why would we do that? Why not just get focused around, we know we need to do some work on science. We bring in somebody to do that, science health. And then we allow Brenda to go back to just being math TOSA and getting focused on how we're going to improve the math piece. And then why don't I just touch base on a couple of these other pieces? The NAMS mental health specialist, youth contact, we had a contract with them for drug and alcohol assessment, but they have not been able to fill that contract the whole year. And so what we're proposing here is actually to bring in a mental health coordinator for NAMS, and then to divvy up some of the way that we were doing the drug and alcohol assessment, so that the youth contact person at the high school would do both, and that then the counselors at both spaces would do a little bit more of the drug and alcohol assessment. But this isn't a complete, well, that's what this is. That's what we're proposing here is that we need to have some kind of drug and alcohol assessment at the middle school, and youth contact isn't going to provide it at this point. And then the calc admin is just the piece where we're trying to build that program out. It felt like the student investment account and its focus on kind of at-risk students, that felt like the right place.
So Dave, youth contact isn't doing it at the middle school because they don't have enough time to do it at the middle school, or are there other constraints that prevent them from doing that at the middle school, that drug and alcohol stuff?
It's the staffing. They just can't hire staff. And so they basically came to us and said, we can't fill 2.0. Okay. We're only going to fill 1.0 this year.
Okay. And the Science Health TOSA is K6.
Yes.
Okay.
Perfect.
Okay. All right. So I guess any further SIA questions?
Well, just a general question. I mean, so that's the budget for next year. The year after, do we know, is it the same anticipated funds? I mean, same amount of money, or do we know that, or?
We don't know yet. We can anticipate probably the same or more, depending on the new biennium, because this is the second year of the biennium, so it's pretty known. And then again, Dave has to go through this fall, that kind of community engagement process, and that will then drive the budget for the following year.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. I mean, it's great to have these funds. I just worry about them going away, right? I mean, that's all. I hope they don't go away. I guess that's what I'm saying.
I don't think they will. I mean, it came into Oregon law. It's part of that corporate activity tax. Yeah. So, and that's how we get that revenue. It's just a matter of now we have that additional funding source. So I think the real question is going to be when the state allocates funding for education for the general fund?
Mhm.
Are they going to continue to allocate us at the level that they're allocating us with us having these funds? So I think that's probably more of a risk than us losing the SIA funds.
Right. You know what I mean? The money goes up and down. It always has.
Yeah.
Moved around. So that's, I guess that's more what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right.
Great
Thanks.
question. Okay. So the other part of tonight is just to give you guys an update on where we are with Esser 1, 2, and 3. These are new one-time funds because of the COVID pandemic. And we brought information to you in the fall on Esser on how we had anticipated spending the money or the funds. And then again in February, we talked about the HVAC and air quality facilities improvements. And so I just wanted to wrap back around before we propose a budget for next year. And we have 3 action items on the agenda tonight around Esser facilities improvements. So just to kind of continue closing the loop and making sure you guys are up to date and aware on what we are doing with the Esser funds and how we're utilizing those. Again, just a quick reminder, there's a huge list of how we can use the Esser funds, and that was all in that October presentation. But overall, it's really to support addressing learning loss, school facilities repair and improvements related to COVID-19 and disease control, indoor air quality, PPE, and any other kind of infectious disease control. And then really a broad category of any COVID-19 related activities. So these funds are pretty broad in how we can utilize those to support our district. So just a quick overview on the purpose of the funds. Our Esser allocations between the 3 Essers, we have over $13 million. And then we have until September 30th of 24 to spend the rest of them. So our plan is this year we are spending quite a bit of it, and then we'll spend a little bit less next year and then a little bit less the following year so that we walk ourselves off of these funds as being additional supports. And so it's not a huge divided by 3, and then we have this huge loss at the end of the 3rd year. Quick overview on how we spent the funds. This slide is straight from the fall presentation. There's no change. These Esser 1 has been fully spent since September. And so that was $923,000. It was spent primarily on health services and IA support, technology, and then licensed temporary subs. So building subs. That's Esser 1. Esser 2, we have a 3-year budget. Last year's actual was $293,000. This year's projected is $2.7 million. And then next year is $833,000 for a total of the $3.8 million. Most of this year's Esser spend is on HVAC improvements and then technology devices and software. We did also use the funds for like the picnic tables and cafeteria tables for the district, some PPE, COVID reopening supplies, custodial, HEPA filters. But overall, Esser 2, by the time we are done, the majority of what we have set aside is really for HVAC and air quality improvements, and then technology devices and software.
Can I ask a question about the community school? Is that the community school that gets some funds there?
Right. They get in a percentage of distribution based on their enrollment as compared to ours.
Right. Do you know how they, I mean, I'm just curious, they use it on, do you know how they use the funds?
I think David Warner's been doing the budget update on theirs, but I think it's more, it's like, David, are you on here? I don't want to say wrong.
Yeah, I was just going to look it up. So if you want to continue on, I can see if I can find that.
Okay. Thank you, David.
Actually, that quick, I just found it. That's how good I am. That's a joke. The charter school IA support and COVID safety is their line item they have under Esser.
So safety related to the pandemic or something then?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, thanks.
Okay, and then the last one is our Esser 3. Similar format to that. This is the plan overall, but it's broken out by years. And so this year we're going to spend the majority or the biggest portion, 3.8 million. Next year's 3 million, and then it drops down to almost 2 million. Most of it is direct services to students, where we're allocating funds to each building to provide direct intervention supports. Esser 3 does have a caveat in it where 20% of these funds have to be spent on interventions. So we can't spend that, it's specific to that. So we do have building specific interventions, and then we have our online K-6 that qualifies for it, our summer match programs, which also qualifies for that 20%. So we're well over the required amount. But then again, we have other big items is like our HVAC and air quality and building IA support. So these are just kind of year over year what our plan is to utilize these funds. And then most of the HVAC and air quality line items, there's a significant portion in here, but in that February presentation, we really listed out the details behind that. So any questions on Esser 3?
Eileen, the summer programs match, is that similar to what happened this summer when they had all those different classes?
Yes, part of those grants that we got for providing all of that extra summer enrichment and summer credit recovery is that we have to provide a district match. And that district match can come from any other funding source. So we're using ESSER funds to be able to do that match support so we can utilize both grants to the fullest.
So there'll be a summer program again this year for the students with all those fun classes they had last year.
Yeah, I think it'll be a little bit less than what last year is. Last year was pretty robust.
Yeah.
And we didn't get quite the allocation we got last year. So we do have $250,000 set aside for this summer.
And will we partner up with like the Parks and Rec and also the libraries for this summer?
Kate, I've put them into contact with the ESD. The state has put that through community grants, which is separate, and they are working on writing a proposal. So the Forest Grove City Librarians, we've sent that email to them, as well as Ann Lane, the Park and Recs director for Forest Grove, and they're looking forward right now to submitting an application. Kate, I'm sorry, you're muted.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
It wouldn't work. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, John.
Hey, Eileen, just quick. So after 23, 24, this all goes away, correct?
September of 2024, we have to
Okay.
have the funds spent by. Correct.
Okay. And once they're spent, there's no inkling of, no. Okay.
No.
That'll be a little bit of a drop off then. I like the way you've tiered it down so that it doesn't feel like you're falling off a cliff when the money goes away.
It's still going to be an impact because we'll have the next biennium. These funds will go.
Thanks.
We've tried to match the FTE that's in here is the building and health IA support. We've tried to match it with the COVID so that again, it will end and those folks will not be part of the organization per se unless we build something into the general fund. But Eileen's has helped us try and keep these purposes separate so that we're not going to be dropping, licensed FTE on when this goes away.
Thanks.
Okay. Oh, I do have it in here. Just a reminder of this is just a screenshot of the major Esser HVAC air quality improvements, since that's such a large portion. 3 of these things will be on the board agenda later tonight. But just a reminder of what those things were. A lot of it is replacing old outdated HVAC equipment with new HVAC equipment that has like MERV 13 capabilities. What'll be later on in the agenda tonight is the Harvey Clark and Dilly window replacements, so that we can replace those windows. They're going to be more efficient. Plus we can open the windows and increase airflow. And then the NAMS chiller to be able to help support maintaining that indoor air temperature and controlling the CO2 levels. So those are things that you'll see later, but I'll have a PDF of this sent to Kathy, so you can have this for future if you'd like. And then for Esser, if you had any other questions on Esser or the purpose or how we intend to utilize those funds.
Okay, thank you, Eileen. If no one has any questions, I will move on the agenda. Okay. We have a number of action items tonight. So the first one is the Licensed Teacher Appreciation Proclamation. And I will read that and then we can approve the proclamation. The Teacher Appreciation Week 2022. Whereas today's teachers mold our future citizens through their guidance and education. And whereas today's teachers encounter students of widely differing backgrounds and abilities. And whereas our society expects public education to provide quality education services to all children, no matter what their backgrounds or abilities. And whereas our country's future depends in large measure upon the education our youth receive today. And whereas teachers spend countless hours outside their classrooms preparing lessons, evaluating progress, counseling and coaching students, and performing community service. And whereas our community recognizes this, that its teachers are providing quality education services to our children. Now, therefore, be it proclaimed that the Forest Grove School District Board of Directors designate the week of May 2nd through the 6th, 2022 as Teacher Appreciation Week in this community. And be it further proclaimed that the Forest Grove School District Board of Directors calls on the community to join with it in personally expressing appreciation to our teachers for a job very well done. Dated the 25th day of April 2022. And I need a motion to approve the proclamation for Teacher Appreciation Week.
So moved.
Second,
I'll second.
discussion. We'll take a roll call vote. Mark,
Yes.
Brad,
Yes.
Val,
Yes.
and I'm a yes also. The next item on action items is the surplus equipment, and Enrique is going to share that with us.
Thank you. Yeah, the action item before you today is for surplus or obsolete broken technology hardware. There is a large amount of broken and or obsolete technology hardware that cannot be repaired or is no longer supported by the vendor or manufacturer and is incompatible with existing software and systems. The hardware has no significant resale value and it cannot be repurposed in the district. So it has been determined to be surplus. FGSD will work with recyclers and asset recovery companies to limit e-waste from the surplus equipment, such as using recycler buyback programs when possible, where they can kind of break down the older hardware and maybe use the component parts, reuse the component parts as raw materials, such as the different plastic or metal and things like that. Our recommendation to the school board is to approve declaring the provided list of broken and obsolete hardware as surplus and approve working with different recyclers and asset recovery companies to collect and dispose or process the hardware.
Any questions?
Well, just a comment. I think if I'm correct, this board packet was like 283 pages, right? So I think that this is probably the bulk of the 283 pages is what we're talking about here, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah, on that note, when I was going through the list, I was like, it just keeps going and going and going. So
Right.
I guess my question, Enrique, is are we replacing a lot of those devices? Or have we already replaced some of them? Or are we doing that in stages?
Yeah, a lot of this is just stuff that is kind of been backed up due to the pandemic. Stuff
Okay.
that have been sitting at the warehouse for the last 2 years and been collecting kind of off and on over the last 2 years. That just now kind of getting the time and the resources and the staff to kind of go through and inventory everything, get everything kind of organized. So yeah, that is one of the reasons is that we're kind of getting to things that the pandemic kind of didn't allow us to.
Just incredible detail on all of those, Enrique. All that data that you had to input on those, all that stuff was.
It's a lot of pallets that we went
through.
through.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. All right.
I'm wondering, do we get a dollar amount back from the surplus when you know, how does that work?
Depending on the recycler, some of them, the equipment is either such that they are so broken down that it just goes to a straight kind of e-waste recycler. When possible, we do try to find kind of asset recovery firms that if the device is in good enough condition where they can actually maybe get to the component parts, they will collect them, go through them, and then if they find, we'll give you $5 for this because we can maybe reuse a card or some cables that are part of it. They'll send us a report back and say, okay, based on what you sent us, this is kind of what we'd be able to give you for any parts we were able to salvage.
You don't have an estimate amount of what maybe.
No, because unfortunately with that, the only way they can give an estimate is they have to actually physically collect it, take it back to their warehouse, and then go through it all. And then at the end, they'll let us know, hey, based on what you sent us, we'll be able to give you this for it. And most of the time, it's either going to be zeroed out or it'll be a few dollars here and there based on the component.
Okay, well, that's interesting to know. Any questions for Enrique? No. I'll make the motion. I move to approve the technology equipment and surplus equipment list dated April 25th, 2022 as surplus and have the district work with electronics recyclers and asset recovery companies to collect and process the hardware. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Further discussion? I'll do a roll call vote. Valerie?
Yes.
Brad?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
And I'm a yes also. The motion passes. The next item up is Neil Armstrong Middle School chiller replacement.
Thank you, Kate. I also have Mark Hughes on tonight to answer any questions if you have them. This is the Neil Armstrong chiller replacement. We're looking at replacing the old ineffective or inefficient chiller and water cooling tower over at Neil Armstrong, which is currently at its end of life. We're looking at using a purchasing agreement with MICPA, and they've come in and give us a bid for the project. It would be used, or we would be using Esser funds. Overall, with all of our contingency and additional costs, the entire project would be about $795,000. But right now, what we're asking is the board to approve the contract with Train for $746,706 and to use Esser funds for that.
How come there's a discrepancy between you saying it's going to cost 790, but you're asking for 740?
The contract with Train is 746, and the overall project itself, if Mark's managing it and the costs and contingency and everything that's going to be associated to it, brings it up. So the project itself is going to be higher, but the contract with Train is only for a part of the work. And that contract is what we're looking for approval for.
Okay. I will move to approve the award, the contract for the Neil Armstrong Middle School chiller replacement to train for $746,706 to be funded with Esser grant funds. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Further questions? I'll do a roll call vote. Brad,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
Val,
Yes.
and I'm a yes also, and the motion passes. The next action item is Harvey Clark and Fernhill Elementary School HVAC replacement. Eileen, you're up again.
Thank you. So we have HVAC equipment at both Harvey Clark and Fernhill that is at its end of life cycle, and we're looking at upgrading them from MERV 8 to MERV 13 filters to improve the air quality in those areas of the school. It would be 4 units at Harvey Clark and 2 units at Fernhill. The cost for both of them with train is $313,457. The overall project cost is going to be higher, similar to the last one where we have the site cost and contingency. So between everything, it's going to be about $386,695 is what we're projecting it to be. But the contract itself is only $313,457. And so tonight we're looking for board approval of the contract with Train.
Okay, thanks, Eileen. I think I'll go ahead and, because this is written out pretty easy, I move to approve the award contract for HVAC unit installation at Harvey Clark Elementary School and Fernhill Elementary School to Train for $313,457 to be funded with District Esser grant funds. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Further discussion? We'll do a roll call vote. Mark,
Yes.
Brad,
Yes.
Val,
Yes.
and I'm a yes also. The motion passes. The next item up is Harvey Clark and Dilly Elementary School window replacement. And Eileen, again, you're up.
Last one. So this one is for the Harvey Clark and Dilly Elementary School window replacement. It is the south classrooms of both wings at Harvey Clark and then the original classroom wing at Dilly. And what we're looking at doing is replacing the windows with similar window systems that were put in when we did the north facing windows at Harvey Clark. We did go out for a full RFP for this project, and both Buildscape and Cedar Mill Construction put bids on for this. We are recommending that the board award the contract to Buildscape for $590,525 and to be used with ESSER funds.
Okay, any questions for Eileen? All right, I move to approve the award of contract to build SCAP. Is it called SCAP? LLC for window replacement at Harvey Elementary School and Dilly Elementary School for $525,000 to be funded with District Esser grant funds. Do I have a second?
I'll second.
We'll do a roll call vote. Brad,
Yes.
Val,
Yes.
Mark,
Yes.
and I'm a yes also, and the motion passes. The next item is math instruction materials purchase. John O'Neill, or is that?
Yep, that's correct.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, okay. I'm
Thanks,
just want to
Katie.
make sure.
Yeah, and I
Yeah, you're
also have Allison Samuel here this evening and Elena Santana here this evening to help answer any questions should they crop up. So as the board knows, this is a second read. Our district math adoption committee unanimously recommended the adoption of HMH Go Math and AGA for grades 7 through 12 in 2016. And the initial purchase ends July 1 of this coming July. We did a brief PowerPoint presentation last board meeting but I'd like to try and simplify things. And I'd like to thank Mark Everett for some questions that he's given me back and forth regarding some clarity. So there's two timelines that we'd like to share with you. One is PK5 math adoption timeline and 612 math adoption timeline. And this 22-23 next year will be the first year of the new lit adoption, and we will be consumed with providing year-long PD to support the implementation, just-in-time support for teachers implementing the new curriculum for PK6, but this is for PK5 adoption. The following year, or 2 years of the lit adoption, will take place the second year, 23-24 school year, and we'll continue to provide year-long PD not only on the implementation supports, but also instructional strategies necessary for students to access this new curriculum. And Elena can provide additional information, but it's a knowledge-based spiraling curriculum, and it is a rather rigorous curriculum. So teachers will work on effective scaffolding strategies so that students can attain that grade level curriculum. So this basically, in essence, gives our lit teachers, our PK5 teachers who are generalists, time to implement the new lit adoption and not overload them with an additional math adoption. During the 24-25 school year, or 3 years out, that will be the third year of the new lit adoption, and we will conduct the new math adoption process. We'll review the programs, we will pilot, we'll make a recommendation for adoption, and then we will go ahead and put in an order by first part of June, 24-25 school year, and the 25-26 school year will be the first year of the new math adoption for grades PK5. Now the state is going through a math adoption instructional materials review this summer. They should conclude, if all goes well, by October. Both Allison and Brenda's unable to attend this summer, so we're going to find somebody else, probably our new K6 science TOSA that we just talked about earlier, to attend that selection process. That worked very well with Elena, engaged effectively in that summer review this past summer with ODE, and she had a firsthand up-close review of all the available and approved curriculums. So 612 math adoption timeline, this coming school year is the first year of the new math courses and the new math sequence the board just approved. We will identify also the 8th grade math course changes to fit into the new high school math courses and that course of sequence. There's 3 standards that have been changed in the 8th grade, and we need to fully implement that next year at the 9-12 so that we can go ahead and inform the changes that are necessary for the 8th grade math. And again, our district representatives will participate in the ODE review and selection of math materials for the State Board of Education approval during the 22-23 school year. 2 years out, or the 23-24 school year, will be the second year of the new math course sequence, which informs what we need to purchase. We are one of the few states or districts in the state that are actually piloting the new math course sequence. Other districts have talked about it, and they just don't have the bandwidth. Their teachers don't. And so they've decided to pass on the pilot. Our secondary teachers, under the leadership of Allison Samuel at the high school, are confident in their ability to go ahead and pilot that. The whole intention behind doing that is so that we make an informed decision when we go look at the approved State Board of Education math materials to help inform the best possible selection. So we will conduct the new math adoption process for grades 6 through 12 in that second year, 2 years from now, that 23-24 school year, with full implementation of the math adoption for grades 6 through 12, 24-25 school year. What we're saying here is these are our math specialists. They're highly trained in mathematics, and they have a strong background. They're also not teaching a new lit adoption, so they can go ahead and move into that a year early, but they need that time, again, to accommodate the new math courses and the new math course sequence development to help inform that. This proposal here for grades PK5 math adoption allows a firm, solid foundation into the new lit adoption and supporting individual classroom teachers with the support they need and ongoing training for those 2 solid years. In our district, as Kate knows, it's the same elementary teachers, teacher leaders that step up for the math adoption as they do for the lit adoption. We just want to make sure that they have the capacity to provide that ongoing support and just in time meet the needs of teachers in the classroom. So what this does, basically, we have the 3 different proposals in front of you. 1 year purchase is $164,965. A 2-year purchase is $275,484. That saves the district $54,445. And the 3rd year Go Math purchase, that's only the K6, costs an additional $27,000 for that 3rd year. So again, this is up to the board to determine what they would, what your pleasure is. What we're recommending is that we follow this proposed timeline. And what we're asking for is $302,492 for 2 years, AGA, Algebra Geometry, Algebra 2, HMH purchase, and 3 years Go Math, K5 purchase. Are there any questions?
Well, John, you're right. I was the one that was asking about this the most. I contacted ODE because I just wanted to get straight from them what the ground rules were for this, right? And so they did email me back and they said, I've got the email here that it says new materials should be implemented in Oregon classrooms by fall 2023. With an approved postponement, districts have until fall 25 at the latest to implement the new math materials. And the reason that I was looking at all this is because you've got 3 options there with different, I mean, or maybe it's not,
absolutely,
but so, why, which one, what makes sense, right? And why, I was starting to think, well, why would we order the Go Math when maybe we're supposed to have them in classrooms earlier and we're postponing it? And do we need to postpone it? And so that's what I was thinking about all of
absolutely.
So it was a little bit, for me, it was just a little bit confusing. And so that's kind of why, I've had a number of questions about this.
No, and I totally appreciate that, Mark. It helped us gain greater clarity. We did put together, I don't know, about an 8-page slideshow for tonight. And then based on your questions, we were like, okay, we need a 1-pager, for our entire system so that they can see this.
Yeah, for me, it just helped me when the ODE rep said, they should be in classrooms. That I know we use the term adoption, but really almost what it should be is, when are these going to be in the classrooms for kids to start using them? And maybe take out the word adoption and just say in classrooms for use fall of 23 or fall of 24 or whatever. It just, when she used that language, it was helpful to me. So
good. All right.
So thanks.
Yeah,
thanks
you
for doing this, and I'll certainly look at that.
Excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other questions for John? Well, I talked to a couple teachers, and they said they felt 2 years, 3 years out would be really good because especially at the elementary level,
Yeah.
The adoption of the literacy for the fall, that would be only 1 year in their belt, with that, and then to have to learn a second. So I think the plan looks really good, John, from my talking to teachers and what they want. And they have liked Go Math at the elementary level. They have felt that it's been effective, and they already have that under their belt and they're solid with that. And so I really don't want to overload the teachers, especially at the elementary level. So thank you for doing that. It looks good. For me, it looks good.
Yeah, I guess that was another question I have is how are the teachers perceiving the materials that we're using now? And so when Kate said, just now that she's talked to some elementary teachers and they like it, that's great. I don't have a sense of what middle school or high school teachers are saying about the curriculum they have now, though, John. And so I don't know. Do they like it? I mean, is it working for them?
I have the expert right here. Allison works in the middle school PLCs for all of like 7th grade math, 8th grade math, and then also the high school. So Allison, you want to provide some feedback?
Yeah, I think you can definitely find teachers that like it, and you can definitely find teachers that don't at the secondary level. I think we have quite a mix. And really the timeline at the secondary is purely based on the new courses at the high school. We won't know what we're looking for in a new adoption until we actually try this. And we actually have I'm part of the ESD group that's looking at these new courses. And we're going to actually have a lot of districts looking to us because we're actually getting on these courses and going to teach them in the classroom so that we can kind of inform, hey, this is what you need to look for. And so we just really felt it was important to get that year down before we go into an adoption. Just so we know what we really need for those classes, especially the data science, because it's brand new and we don't know what's even going to be available in curriculum for that. And we just really need to get out there and teach it.
Okay. And are you going to be reviewing materials then?
I've applied to be on the commission.
Applied. You've applied. Okay. I see. Okay. All right.
Any other questions from the board? Okay, thank you, Allison. Thank you, John, very much. It was really informative.
And thank you, Elena, for being here just to help answer questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So this will come up for a vote on the May 9th board meeting, correct? Okay, got it.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, we just have 2 more things. Future board items, discussion around returning to in-person board meetings. So I think that we agreed that we would start in May. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Is everybody all right with that? Val, are you okay with that?
Yep.
Okay, all right. And the next thing, do we have any board members have anything to share or add to the current list of future items? Does anybody want to add to that list? No? Okay, that's terrific. I will adjourn the meeting at 7:40 and everybody have a nice evening and see you soon.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kate.
Have a good night, everybody.